is focusing on the different input, output, and all other components of computers. And will start our unit 2 with the first chapter, components, computer components, and the basic idea. We already know that there are different parts of computers. We already have the idea. So what are the major components of a computer? We already know. The major components of a computer is hardware, software, and firmware. We already know. So what a hardware is nothing but a physical component that we can touch and feel the presence. We can touch it and feel the presence of that device. Like most of the hardware components, physical components of a computer. So main major type of components are there in a desktop machine or a laptop or any other computing device. We will be having a hardware, and there are different components of hardware itself. We will be having a cabinet, system cabinet in case of desktop or tower computers, and there will be inside that cabinet itself, there are a lot of additional components to serve different purposes or different functionalities, like motherboard, etc. Motherboard, RAM, ROM, etc. CPU, etc. will be there. And the main properties, they wear out. Okay, after a period of time, the electronic components, these all hardware parts are built with mechanical and electronic components, so electronic devices. So after several years of use, the electronic components in that particular hardware device will wear out or damage. Okay, so that's a problem we faced when after buying a laptop or mobile phone or anything. It will damage with a physical problem. If something, okay, physical damage, okay, or electricity problem, okay, like that, okay, overheat, they will turn down your machine. These are some problems with hardware. They wear out and require replacement in order to serve this the actual functionality. We need to replace the device, or we need to recover that error or troubleshoot that error to make it as a good system functionality. And the other part, after hardware, the mainly a computer will contain. We already know as a VCA graduate, VCA student, we say there are a lot of applications or softwares, application software or system softwares available. These are the main part of computer. Without an operating system, okay, system software like operating system, we can't, as a user, and a hardware cannot interact with each other. So like that, there are multiple software. Without the user instructions, a computer cannot work. We already know. So we are formulating a set of instruction and make it as a software, and that software will serve along with the functionality, with the combination of hardware and all tools available. Then only the computing functionality, like input is given to computer and process it and get the output and store it. That main functionality of computer will function. And the other major component of a computer is a firmware. Some of you know that in most of the cases, this is the combination of a hardware and software part. One example is our BIOS chips that will be present now in our motherboard of a PC or a computer. So basically what it is, so there will be a small chip. Inside that chip, we will program. Okay, we will start coding and we will burn that program into a chip, and that chip will serve some kind of operation. Say will do some operations. Okay, there are a lot of examples like embedded systems, IoT computers, IoT devices. These are all firmwares. A small device can be make it as a microprocessor type of thing. Okay, and we can put it in anywhere, any type of device, and it will work as a computing device. These are the firmware devices, software that is designed to act in intermediary between the software and hardware. So in our case, in computers, we will be having a lot of one BIOS chip that will help for the booting process of the computer. Okay, some instructions are preloaded by the manufacturers of that motherboard into a particular chip called BIOS chip, and these instructions placed in the BIOS or burned into the BIOS chip is helping the booting process. Okay, loading operating system from secondary storage to the primary memory. This is called booting process. Okay, that loading of operating system to main memory and make it as active. Loading process, loading of operating system is done by BIOS, and this is done by a BIOS chip with the help of a non-volatile, okay, memory. And basically, hardware, software, and firmware are the main components of a computer. And in our course, we will be focusing on, not focusing on the software part. We are focusing on the hardware units of the computer. So when we talked about hardware, it is a physical device we can touch and feel. We can, it is a electronical or mechanical device. We can till wear out. We already know. So deeply look into it. There are two type of hardware components. Okay, there are two components for hardware. They are classified as two based on the location in which they are these devices are located or components are located. The first classification is peripheral devices. We already know what are the peripheral devices or external devices. That is outside a cabinet, system cabinet. We can definitely see it at the without looking in opening any device parts or something like that. So basic example is the input output devices and the auxiliary storage mechanisms, storage devices, not storage devices, some external storage devices, etc. And the internal components are that are present, internal hardware components are present inside a computer. Okay, so a computer, in a sense, we are talking about a desktop or a tower machine, and in your home personal computers like desktop machines or tower computers will be available in for human home based computing. Most of the time we use that for their home purposes, home based applications. And these are the small devices that we already discussed in the last chapters. The types of computer will be having a large portion of computers are personal computers. In that personal computer, we'll be looking into various kind of stuff, desktop, tower, then smartphone, computers, etc. So the internal components are the major components. They are the without that components, the computer cannot operate. They cannot operate to interconnect the components together. So by looking into a desktop machine, in this case, the first image itself will be having a cabinet. Okay. So what is this cabinet means? Anyone have the idea? System cabinet. Or it can be also called as case, system case or system cabinet. Or it can be system, there are a lot of names for that. A desktop machine is placed over a desktop, and there is the CPU, the motherboard, the RAM, ROM, etc. All those internal components are placed inside a box like structure. That box is called the cabinet, system cabinet. This is another external component. And internal components, all those components that is placed inside system cabinet or the system case, that rectangular box style structure is called the internal components of the computer, and these are the very important components. These are all interconnected, and without the interconnection, the communication between these devices cannot be possible. So internal components are the very important components, and there are some peripheral devices that they also play very important role, input, output, and so getting input, we will use input devices, then so displaying like printer, monitor, etc. Okay, we will use output devices like peripheral devices. When looking into commonly used input output devices or peripheral devices, there are a lot of examples. Okay, so the fundamental input device or fundamental output device are there. Their keyboard, the mouse, etc. are the fundamental input devices, and the fundamental output device is a screen monitor, computer monitor is the fundamental output device. Other than these basic input-output devices, there are a lot of additional input-output devices used in different areas. We already know that. So the list is given here. There are optical character recognition, magnetic ink character recognition, MICR, okay, OCR. Then touch screen displays available. We can just touch it using this. Input and output are provided using touch screen. Then these are barcode readers, badge readers, and cassette drives. Okay, then CD-ROM, CD drives, digital camera, tablets, scanners. These are all examples of different input-output devices or peripheral devices. And another example is SAS DOS DATs devices, drives. Okay, serial access drives. These are drives used for magnetic tape and hardware devices, hard disk, etc. The hard disk drives or magnetic tape drives, etc. are called as SAS or DAS drives. Then printers will be there, plotters, then robotic arms, robotic actuators, etc. will be there. That will give input to a robotic computer. Then speech synthesizer, that will convert a speech into text and vice versa. Visual display technologies, and sort of the list is not complete. There are a lot of other input-output devices based on our application area or our working industry. We can use different input-output devices. If you are working in a multimedia company, there are a lot of multimedia developing tools. Okay, additional to software, there are some specialized input-output devices. These are commonly used for grabbing the structure of an object and make it as a 3D. Like that, there are some input device called data glove. That glove can be used as an input device to grab the structure of the object. And like that, there are different tools. Some we already know, light pens. There are a lot of pointers, etc. will be there. We already know that. Cannot go into depth. We'll be covering some of these input-output devices deeply in our next classes or next sessions. And looking into the inside of a computer or the internal components of a computer, the major component of a internal computer is called as the motherboard. That's why the name itself, the mother of that computer, motherboard, the board of the computer. This board is the main internal component that will interconnect all components in the computer together. And in order to take an input from outside using from a user, we can use a keyboard. But how that keyboard information, key press information reaches to the yes.
Written present ആണ് ഇത് മൈക്ക്
റിസിൻ പ്രസന്റ് ആണെന്ന് എനിക്കറിയാം. ജോയിൻ ചെയ്തിട്ട് എവിടാണെന്ന്
റീകണക്ട് ആയിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ് സാർ.
ഓ ഓക്കെ ഓക്കെ. ഇത്രയും നാൾ അങ്ങനെ ആയിരുന്നു?
അല്ല, ഇന്നത്തെ കാര്യം.
ഇന്നത്തെ കാര്യം എനിക്ക് ബാക്കി കാര്യങ്ങളൊക്കെ എനിക്ക് അറിയുന്നുണ്ട്, ഞാൻ ശ്രദ്ധിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്, അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് ചോദിച്ചത്. ഓക്കെ ദെൻ. Okay, then we will continue. The major components or main components of a system cabinet or entire system, entire computer system, it is called as the motherboard of the computer. The name itself tells that the role is very much important. Okay, so the task, there is any electronic device will be having a board, system circuit board. In our case, in computers, this circuit board is called the motherboard of the computer. All the internal communication or internal connections will be possible, or the cables or wiring, etc. will be provided using this system circuit board. So electronic circuit board, ECB, which is called almost all electronic circuit, all electronic circuit device will be having a ECB, electronic circuit box. Board. Okay, in our case it is called motherboard, and all the internal components are attached to that, and the outside components or peripheral devices are attached to that. If some device is not attached to a motherboard, we cannot communicate to that particular device. if for example, if you are not connecting your keyboard to the back of the cabinet, okay, computer case, we cannot communicate. The keyboard will not be detected, okay. And if some wrong, if you are wrongly connected your keyboard to the back side or port of the cabinet, then only then also it will not read input from the motherboard, not keyboard, okay. So the all communication or activities, all computer parts or the all internal output device, internal device or all peripheral device are connected to motherboard using a cable or a internal connections, buses. The internal connections are called buses. We cannot directly see, but there are some wired like such as in a board. If you look into a board, there are a lot of wiring we can see like that. These are called buses and internal cables, internal wires. So in this picture itself, we will be getting, okay, I will make it as a presentation. Okay, so this image in this case will be the middle picture, the motherboard image. When you look into that, there are a lot of components connected to here, attached here into the motherboard. The main components present in motherboard is a CPU, okay, and there are slots for memory. Then there are relays, cables or connectors that connect from motherboard to your hard disk drive, etc. Then there are some adapters that will that we need to connect to a graphic card or a sound card, etc. Then there are some additional parts, some electronic devices. Then system fan, okay, cooling system will be there. Then some ports will be there or expansion slots will be there. The ports are used to connect to external devices. The keyboard, monitors, etc. will be there. For that, we will be having a lot of connection. Entire connection for communication is only happening because of this motherboard. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes,
Am I
sir.
audible? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Something happened.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Fine. Fine. And the all communication, like all information in this case will be motherboard communication is in the form of binary or digital form, and the signals, binary digital signals are passing from one device to another device. For that, we will be having some circuitry and we'll be having some cables or buses, digital buses. In that case, we'll be using lot of database, etc., control base, etc. We'll be looking into that later. And all this circuitry are made up of different electronic device combination. Already we know the CPU or the all those things are microprocessors are made of some small or integrated circuits, ICs, and that integrated circuit also made up of miniaturized form of lot of transistors or capacitors. So like that, there are a lot of IC chips here, microprocessors present there, and some specialized parts like expansion slots, memory units, okay, etc. will be present here. And additionally, in order to connect to peripheral device or input output devices, or external devices, external devices, auxiliary storage mechanisms, we will be need some ports. Okay, that ports like parallel port, serial port, USB ports, etc. will be there. PS2 port will be there. And when we look into a motherboard, we already know there are slots for memory, and there are mainly three type of memory. We will be knowing that. Okay, main memory will be, again we will be having a random access memory. We already know primary memory will be random access memory. Then ROM memory is there, read-only memory, that is permanent anyway. These are used in BIOS and all, BIOS chips. And CMOS battery, CMOS memory is there. This is also other than batteries. There is a battery called CMOS battery. Other than that, there is a chip associated with that CMOS chip is there. That is also a memory part that will hold some information like timing information and all. That battery, this battery got named because of that battery. CMOS battery provide power to this CMOS chip or the BIOS chip. Okay, that's why that name is there. This is also a permanent storage mechanism to store system clock information and system synchronization information. And there are some different modules. Okay, we will be looking into that. Memory will be having different type of memories, DIMM and SIM memory. Lot of variations are there. Lot of different classifications or generations are there. We'll be looking into that. Anyway, the main memory is mainly used, or the memories are mainly used for holding some information. It can be volatile or non-volatile. We'll be looking into that. We already know that. And basically there are these categories: RAM, ROM, and CMOS type of memories. So RAM is the main memory that interact with CPU, and primary ROM memory also plays a very much important role because it is also permanent and it will be also entirely able to communicate with CPU at the initial stage of booting like stages. That's why the name is primary memory. Primary memory also there are main categories. And another part is a motherboard contains a system clock. That clock is getting powered value from the CMOS battery and all. That clock is very much important. That will synchronize with the system, and if the system clock is not correct, we cannot able to connect to internet and all. We will be monitor it and we will change the clock, system clock according to the. Then we will be having the important part of the computer, central processing unit. Okay, so we'll be having control unit. In that CPU itself, we'll be having control unit and ALU, arithmetic and logical unit. And ALU itself will be having arithmetic unit and logical unit. For performing arithmetic operation, we'll be having a arithmetic operation logic unit, arithmetic logic unit, and the logical parts are done by another circuitry. Okay, there are these all those things, microprocessor or any other CPU. Okay, any other CPU, we look into that. There will be lot of circuitries in order to perform additions or subtraction. We will be using adder circuit, full adder, half adder, etc. Those circuit will be used. In logical case, we are using gates. Okay, that's why there are separations. There are separate units for performing arithmetical operation, that are adders and all, adder circuit and all. And in order to perform logical operation, there are circuits like logical gates, AND gate, FOR gate, like that. Lot of gates are available. These are all various electronic circuitries. So a group of device gates are there that will perform logical operation, and group of adders and other circuit will be there. They are performing arithmetical operators. And there is some control unit. The main importance of control unit is transferring information from memory to CPU. Okay, so CPU, that data transfer of information or fetching information from input devices. Okay, and that scheduling task, etc. will be governed by or monitored by the control unit of the computer. So the CPU is the main part, okay, brain of the computer. That's why it will govern that passing of information, and also it will process the information. Together it will doing the core part of the computer. Okay, the processing part. That importantly, we can say that a CPU is really the main part of the computer. The processing unit is the main part of the computer. And addition to that, addition to CPU and memory, there are some expansion slot. Okay, so these are the part of the computer that will serve additional computing functionalities. Like in order to process a video, image processing, or in order to work with graphical processors or video editing, etc. Okay, gaming. Okay, intensive task. We need GPU. For connecting that, we need GPU expansion slots in your motherboard. In order to attach a GPU, we need a separate slot like RAM slot in the motherboard. So we need to connect your GPU to that slot. Like the slots are nothing but where we can place that device. By looking into this motherboard picture, we will be having a memory, and that memory is pointed to a slot. These are the slots. These all are the locations in which in the motherboard where we can place a component or a module. A memory is a module like that. GPU, okay, sound card. These are all modules that we can connect to this. Okay, here you can see another different. There are a lot of expansion slots available in the motherboard. One or two sound cards will be there. Then there are some GPU slot will be available. When you purchase a card, okay, and you will be having, you have to check the compatibility of that card with your motherboard. There are some issues we will face after buying. Your motherboard will not support that GPU. Okay, that's because your expansion slot is not compatible to your GPU or your memory you are purchasing. So before purchasing or before upgrading your memory, okay, some latest versions will be having some the slots and the memory structure will be different. The module structure will be different. Okay, so we will be hearing about DDR3 or DDR4, okay, versions of memory like that. The previous version, lot of DDR1 on where there are lot of version DIMM structures. We will be looking to that later. So anyway, to get an idea about what is expansion slot, the expansion slot connects these kind of cards. Okay, specialized card. We can say like that. A GPU can be connected, a video card can be connected. For connecting this GPU, there are separate slots available in motherboard. For connecting sound cards, there are separate slots available. One or two slots will be available maximum. So using that, you can connect. You can just plug in and okay, that's complete. Then you can proceed with intensive computing tasks like gaming, okay, rendering, etc., multimedia rendering, etc. And there are a lot of expansion slots there. Then there are a lot of ports. Okay, you can see these ports here. Some backside of the motherboard or the other one side of the motherboard that will be connected to your case. Backside of the case will be having a projected structures and slots that will connect external device to your motherboard. So in order to read information from keyboard or in order to connect mouse to your computer, in order to connect your monitor to the motherboard, etc., will be having. These are all external devices, or we need to have a connection from that device using a cable. We will and a connector. We will connect that device to this expansion, these ports, okay, available at the backside of the system case. So there are various kinds of ports available based on the type of data it transmits or based on the data transfer. There are serial ports available. Okay, in order to connect a modem, there are serial ports available. And in order to connect a parallel port, in order to connect printers or other type of devices, we will be using parallel ports. So the name itself will give idea. The serial port will only send a information at a time. Okay, and parallel port, there are parallel wires or path in which you can send that much number of information per time. If there are 8 lines, you can send 8 bits at a simultaneously. The parallel ports with 16-bit size, you can send 16 bits per time. If you are having a parallel port, okay, like that you can send. And there are SCSI ports and MIDA ports we will be having. So there are some MIDA, we already took that in our last semester. Some of you will be part of that class. So MIDA is musical instrument digital interface. Okay, so in order to connect a music device like a keyboard, okay, you can directly connect that keyboard if you have a MIDA keyboard, MIDA port. Okay, a musical instrument can be directly connected. Musical instrument digital interface is the port. Okay, what is the port that using that port you can connect to any instrument. Okay, that is compatible, that is directly connected, and the sound is not that sound that is recording will not be a digital sound. This is the actual MIDA sound. The original sound of the instrument can be recorded if you have the software like synthesize software, etc., specialized software for doing this MIDA sound edition, etc. So there are specialized ports also. If you are using specialized tasks, in this case, MIDA ports support music engineers or music those sound engineers, sound technicians, etc., or music composers, in order to directly take input from a device and process it or make it attractive or make it some processing. We can use MIDA port that can be available in a computer if you are using that type of device, multimedia or kind of device. Okay, music composing devices. Okay, and your computer will need some specialized software too to make it that specialized MIDA software will be needed. Okay, input or information from the outside world will be obtained in the form of MIDA direct sound, and we can process it using MIDA sort of softwares. So like that, there are a lot of ports available. Especially, there are some common standard ports. Without that, we cannot connect any PS2 port is there. So an example is PS2 port. What is PS2 port is the connection from a keyboard or a mouse, okay, can be connected. Those can be connected using a PS2 port. Now we can have all those connection by USB cables, USB ports. Okay, so USB or PS2. Earlier we are using, before USB standard evolved, we are using PS2 connectors. Now we are using USB connectors. Some of these PS2 cables are not available nowadays in laptops and all. We will not be using that. We are using USBs instead of PS2. And like that, there are parallel port connectors and HDMI ports. Okay, this can be used. These are the parts. These are all parts of a motherboard, system board. Then, by looking into this main memory concept, we can have a clear idea what is it. I not taking it again and again. So then CPU, central processing unit, just go through these portions. And this is one of the important parts. The storage requirement is main memory is limited. So we have a secondary storage part. And again, the secondary storage are of two types. We already look into that in our internal input output part, SAST and DAST. So the full form is sequential access storage devices. These are secondary storage devices. And for getting input from this, we need, in order to store information, we need to have a drive. That drives are input devices that will read information from these devices, hardware devices, and it will taken to your CPU to process or display that information using output devices. So sequential means we cannot directly take information from that device. For an example, main example is binary tapes. These binary tapes are the second generation computer. We look about that. The storage is happened with magnetic drums and magnetic tapes. Okay, the one main drawback of this magnetic tape is we cannot directly look into that. Random access is not possible. Okay, in order to reach into a particular position, we need to move from the initial state to that stage. We cannot index it or we cannot directly reach to it. That's the main problem, though these are very much slower compared to direct access storage devices. And the examples are tapes, etc. And again, we will be using this for large backup of information. Large capability is there because of the limited cost. Okay, we are still using this for large storage and second backup as a backup device. We are using magnetic tapes in server rooms and all, and archive files can be used. Then the direct access storage devices are nowadays we are using all secondary storage devices like hard disk. Okay, all those things are following these direct access mechanisms, and all those secondary devices like hard disk, flash device, flash memory, etc. all are using direct access. Okay, we are not using sequential because of they are slower and we need to have a faster processing capability in our computer. And we already know the memory capacity is measured in bytes and those things will be needed. So memory speed of processing, processor speed. So and one important process is we already discussed this. We have the clear idea booting process. Okay. After you, what that happens because of when you switch on your computer and your computer getting ready by loading your operating system into your main memory and running it. Before that process from starting the computer, when switching on your machine to computer full-fledged computing ability occurred in your computer, that in between process is called the booting process. Okay, and this is only happening because of that BIOS chip available, because the information need to be there in order to execute operating system itself. This also a software. In order to that is a program that need to be loaded from the secondary device to your primary memory or main memory. And actually this will take some power information. Okay, and for that we need to have something in your main memory. The main memory have the instructions. So the primary memory here will be the ROM that will take the BIOS instructions or the booting instruction from that memory, and it will proceed with loading operating system. And one important thing is called bootstrap loader is there. That loader will load your operating system to the RAM memory. The operating system is stored in your machine or your hard disk, secondary storage. In order to load operating system from secondary device to a primary memory that can be directly accessible to CPU, we can have a bootstrap loader, that is the code or instructions that is stored in a BIOS chip, and that chip, the RAM chip or this ROM chip read only, this is ROM read only memory that is already provided by the okay, then this booting process. So after that loading, then we'll be having a post power on self test. Okay, that will test all the information that all the input output devices or the all connected devices are working properly. It will check all those in connected devices with some signal sending to some signal to that devices. That is called power on self test. In order to check that these components are working properly, then the operating system will load. These are all part of the booting process. At the time of booting, all those things will be happen. This is another one of the important part. And there are some examples. There are a lot of computing devices we will be using. These power, we can look into that in the next class, I think. So there will be a lot of detailed working principles will be required. So in this PPT, I will upload this PPT. Just go through this, and again we will be having in our coming classes. We will be describing about all the working of different input output devices detailed. In this PPT, I have included some information about all those, some of the input output device and storage device. Okay. So go through this and come to my next class, and we'll be having a online exam based on our first unit in the next class. And before next class, you have to submit all your pending assignments. If you are not submitting that, you don't need to sit or attend my classes, or don't need to come to my class. Okay. Anyway, anything is there.